The Wump World, written and illustrated by Peet. This is a rather long book, so I'm going to do it in at least 2 installments. The Wump World, written and illustrated by Peet. And these are some other books by Peet. I've never really read any of the others, but I'm sure I would love them because I love this book. The Wump World was a small world, very much smaller than our own world. There were no great oceans, lofty mountains, giant forests, or broad sandy deserts. The Wump World was mostly grassy meadows and clumps of leafy green trees with a few winding rivers and lakes. But it was perfect for the Wumps, who were the only creatures living there. The Wumps were simple grass eaters and spent most of their time grazing on the tall, tender grass that grew in the meadows. In warm weather, they cooled themselves in the crystal clear rivers and lakes, and at night they slept in the shelter of the bumbershoot trees to keep the dew off their backs. Since the Wumps had no enemies, they wandered around just as they pleased, with nothing whatever to worry about. However, the Wumps would have worried if they had known that someone a million miles away was watching their little world. One morning, the Wumps were awakened by a far-off humming sound. It seemed to be coming from somewhere above, and as the humming grew into a heavy roar, the sleepy-eyed Wumps crept through the trees for a peek at the sky. Zooming straight for the earth came a great flock of pot-bellied monsters with tails and fins, spitting fire and shooting out streaks of black smoke. As the monsters swooped down to land, huge legs sprang from their bulging sides, and like gaping mouths, doors flew open. Then ramps shot to the ground, and down the ramps came a horde of tiny creatures swarming out onto the meadow. These were the pollutions from the planet Pollutus. They had left their worn-out old planet to start a new life in a new world. After such a long journey, the pollutions were overjoyed to find themselves on solid ground once more. They were all prattling with excitement as they followed their leader, the topmost pollution and world chief, across the meadow. At the top of a hill, the chief stopped for a long look at the surrounding countryside. Finally, he said, "Looks good. We'll take it. Plant the flag, Sergeant, and let's get things going." One shrill trumpet blast brought giant machines thundering out of the yawning spaceships, rolling down runways and out onto the meadow. The timid Wumps had been watching warily from the shelter of the trees, and at the sight of the giant machines they were horrified. "Wump! Wump!" they cried, and in a wild-eyed panic they went humpity-clumping off through the trees to go diving headlong into the nearest cave. Then down they tumbled head over heels through a twisting tunnel to end up huddled together in dark caverns while the earth shaking machines rumbled and roared high above. Once they got started, the monstrous machines moved at a furious pace, gobbling up trees and grinding them to bits. More giant machines flattened the ground, followed by great scoopers and scrapers and diggers and gigantic cranes. Soon the entire Wump world was overrun. The busy little pollutions kept their mighty machines going full blast day and night without let up, in a frenzy to improve their wonderful new world. Suddenly, great cities sprang up, huge factory buildings with towering smokestacks, high rise apartment buildings, and tall, tall office buildings. And above them all loomed the 100-story skyscrapers. Along with the buildings came a tangle of streets and freeways with on ramps and off ramps, overpasses and underpasses, jammed with trucks and buses and cars of all sizes, rushing pell mell in every direction. It was one great turmoil of noise and confusion, and there was still more to come. Meanwhile, the poor Wumps remained underground, wandering aimlessly through the caverns, feeding on the fuzzy green moss growing on the ledges and the mushrooms clustered in the crannies, and sipping the sweet water from pools fed by underground springs. But they were very unhappy. For all they knew, they might have to spend the rest of their days down there. The Wumps didn't dare venture up to the surface, not even for a peek. They were much too frightened by the endless rumblings and roarings and loud screechings coming from above, and it was growing noisier by the day. There was more and more noise and more of everything. More buildings with more smokestacks puffing more and more smoke. More freeways with more traffic, shooting out more and more clouds of exhaust. More trash and more trash piles, with more and more waste gushing into the rivers and lakes. So I know that this sounds like it is a hopeless situation. And I want you to think about what the perfect world does look like. Was the Wump world perfect before the pollutions came? The pollutions felt that they were making it better and improved. But meanwhile, it was the Wump's world, wasn't it? So think about that for a few minutes, and then if you're ready to listen to the next portion, you may. If you want to take a break and wait till tomorrow, that's fine too.